What do you do when you have a big freezer or an old freezer? What we have now is a full inch on the back and an inch on the front. Hi folks, Dr. FreezerMax. Hey, we're out here in the garage again. It's fall. You know what that means. Chiefs are on a roll. Watch them. Mahomes is it. We're going to solve a problem today that I've heard quite a few of you guys talk about. It's what do you do when you have a big freezer or an old freezer? This one happens to be a really old one. I don't even know how old this is. Over 30 years to 35 years. Old freezers don't have a standard dimension to the measurement of the front and the back. New freezers, almost all of them have a standard dimension, which is why we made the FreezerMax baskets the way we did to fit that dimension. The problem with old freezers, let me grab you a basket and I'll show you. If you try to put, well, you can see down here that we installed the middle layer and the lower layer without any trouble. It's when you get to the top that you can run into trouble with these old freezers. When the FreezerMax basket is extended all the way out, it's about 22 7/8 inches. When you set it in this old freezer, there's barely going to be any overlap on this lip, and it's just not going to be stable enough. What you're going to find is you're not going to be comfortable sliding that back and forth, which is the whole point. Sometimes that dimension's even greater, and that basket won't even sit on there, and it'll want to fall down. So what do you do? Well, in almost every case, you can solve the problem by what I'm getting ready to show you. What we're going to do is we're going to put a rail, an upper rail, right in here on the back of this freezer box and on the front of this freezer box, and that's what the upper baskets are going to sit on. Okay, so what you're going to need to do this, to add an upper rail to your freezer, is of course you're going to need your railing. If you don't have enough that comes with your FreezerMax kit, all you need to do is email me. I'll put some more railing in the mail to you. We'll get it to you in a couple of days. So you're going to need your railing enough to go in this space. Incidentally, this measurement of this freezer box from left to right is 60 inches, 5 feet. Remember, the FreezerMax railing is 36 inches, so it's going to take more than one rail. For the back, it's going to take a rail and a half, and for the front, it's going to take a rail and a half also. So when you text me, or when you email me, I'm going to ask you how many rails do you need. In this case, you're going to need 3, and I'd probably send you 4 to put the top railing in. So you're going to need your rail, you're going to need your measuring tape, just like before, you're going to need your hacksaw, you're going to need a pencil, because you can't use the installation guides for the top rail. The installation guides that come with your FreezerMax system are only to be used on the bottom layer and on the middle layer. So pencil, hacksaw, measuring tape, rail, and your baskets that go on the top. Okay, so step number 1, you've got all your things together. Step number 1 is get your measurement, just like before when you were putting in railing on the bottom and in the middle. You need to get a measurement for how long your railing needs to be. Now this one's going to be more than one rail because it's longer than 36 inches left to right. So I'm going to get a measurement. Remember before, I told you this before as well, and it's important on the top as well. Right here at almost every freezer, that corner is going to be rounded. You want your rail to stop about an inch short of that corner. You don't want your rail to get into that corner because it'll pull the rail out and it won't be firmly up against the side of the freezer. So we'll go ahead and get our measurement. We'll just do all the way side to side. This one measures 60 inches. We're going to subtract 2 inches, one for the left side, one for the right side. We have a measurement of 58 inches that we're going to need total rail for the back. The front's the same. So we need 58 inches, 58 inches. We'll get our rails cut, and I'll be right back and I'll show you how to put them in. Okay, we're back. I've got the rails cut. Since we needed, remember this was 60 inches from side to side. We subtract an inch for the left and an inch from the right, so we had 58 inches. Our railings are 36 inches. So here's the 2 rails that are 36. One will go right there. One will go on that one will go on the back. The other one will go on the front. And then I just cut 2 rails that are 22 inches, and they'll go over here to finish each of the 2 sides. So the rails are all ready to go. Now, here's a critical issue that you have to look to before you do this and put on an upper rail. It has to do, and it's different than the middle rail that you put on, and it's different than the bottom rail that you put on, because on both of those, you use the installation guides. Well, we can't use an installation guide here because each of these freezers is different. And this is why. This is what you have to be very aware of. Older freezers, and in fact newer freezers, sometimes have a big offset right here that this plastic comes down and then goes across this way. So there's a drop of this plastic on the inside box of the freezer. You have to be aware of that, because if you put your rail up too high on this wall and it interferes with that offset, your lid's not going to seal. Now in this case, in this old freezer, if you look across this way, there's essentially no offset. It's flat. Very often it would be clear down here. So this one is not a huge problem. I don't have to be nearly as aware of it. This one, what I'll do is just measure down about, let's say, an inch from the top. I'm going to use my carpenter's pencil and just measure down an inch right here. And that's where the top of my rail is going to be. Okay? So be very aware, make sure you look for the plastic offset in the top of your freezer. If you're going to put a top rail on, you have to compensate. Suppose you had an offset that came down an inch and a half. Well, you would know from this surface right here, you would have to drop at least an inch and a half and probably 2 inches in order to clear that offset for your rail. Okay? In this freezer, it's not a big problem. So, remember, your freezer has to be warm and it has to be dry. It has to be completely defrosted. You can't put rails on unless the freezer is completely defrosted. Occasionally, I'll get messages from people who tried to cheat, and they find out that's not a good idea, because the sealant on these rails will not adhere to the side of your freezer unless it's completely defrosted and dry. So I'm going to put on the back 36-inch rail. Just pull your tape off the way you would on the other railings. Flip it around. Remember, this portion of the rail is the part that goes up. And we're going to put it on like that. I can see my mark right there. That's going to be the top of my rail. I'm off about an inch from that corner. Here's my next mark. Right like that. Then you just walk your way down, press it against the side of your freezer. You want to make sure you have that in the right spot before you press it on the side of your freezer, because once it goes on, it's not going to come off. Okay? That's your top rail. It's already grabbed a hold. That already is bonding to the side of your freezer. Okay, so what about the second rail? Second rail, same way. This one's, I'm going to go ahead and try this one in. I trust my measurement, but I'm going to try it anyway. Let's make sure. Okay, that's good. That's still going to be about an inch from the edge of the freezer. It's avoiding the rounded part, so that's ready to go in as well. Pull off the tape. Here's my mark right here I made. I'm just going to line it up with my thumb on this rail and run it right up to my mark. And I got that a little bit high, but I'm going to press it onto the side of the freezer. Okay, so that's the back rail. I'm going to do the same thing on the front rail, and you'll see how that solves this problem. Okay, so we're ready to finish this up. We've got the railing in, Remember the two critical things when you put any kind of railing in, and there's one issue with that and there's one issue with the top railing. The freezer has to be defrosted, or it has to be dry, or your railings won't stick. We've already got those in place and they're in good shape. When you put a top railing in, you have to be cognizant of the offset that might be in your lid, that you need to measure that offset and then drop down that same amount from this surface right here. This is the surface that this seal is going to seal on. You need to measure from that surface down whatever your offset is, and that's where the top of your rail should be. That way you account for that offset, and your baskets will sit on here and your top will still seal right on that surface. In this case, there wasn't really an offset, so it wasn't a problem at all. Okay, so we've got our railing in. The only thing we have to do now is set the baskets in. I'll show you what the difference is. Remember when we started, there was just a tiny bit of lip that the baskets were sitting on there, and it wasn't enough to really have things be stable. Well, what we have now is a full inch on the back and an inch on the front for the baskets to ride on. And that is how you solve an old freezer that's too deep for the FreezerMax baskets, especially if you can't find the OEM baskets. This is the way you solve that problem. It's still possible to organize with the FreezerMax system. You just have to be a little bit more inventive. Let me show you one more thing when you close this down. I just want to show you up close what you're looking for when you close your freezer. That seal right there has to be perfectly down on the surface of your freezer that you're closing on. Okay, if you've done everything right, that's going to be sealed down on the top of the base of your freezer, and you're looking good. Okay, we've got it all done. I appreciate your time for watching this. As always, if you have questions or comments, or if you have a dilemma that you'd like help with, be sure and email us, FreezerMax@gmail.com. I appreciate everybody that emailed me with this specific problem, saying, hey Doc, what do we do with this? And here you go. So I hope you have an opportunity to watch this, and appreciate you supporting FreezerMax.